3 weeks after my son died, I found a baby tooth beneath my pillow. It was still wet, not damp, wet. There was blood clinging to the root. At first, I thought it must have fallen from somewhere. Maybe it had gotten caught in the sheets. Maybe my exhausted brain was playing tricks on me. Then I remembered something. Oliver had already lost all 4 of his front baby teeth, and every single one of them was sitting inside a little silver tin in my nightstand drawer. I opened the drawer. The tin was still there. The teeth inside were still there. So whose tooth was I holding? Then something knocked inside the wall. 3 soft taps. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from Oliver's bedroom. I remember standing in the hallway staring at that closed door, not moving, not breathing, just listening. Then a child's voice whispered through the plaster. "Mummy?" Everything inside me stopped. For one impossible second, I wanted it to be him. I wanted it more than anything. Then I smelled it. Damp dirt, rotting flowers, old blood. And suddenly, I knew something was terribly wrong. The kind of wrong that changes your life before you even realize it's happening. I wish I had left the apartment that morning. I wish I had thrown that tooth away. I wish I had ignored the knocking, because if I had, maybe I never would have learned what was living inside the walls. Maybe I never would have discovered the truth hidden beneath hundreds of tiny teeth. And maybe I never would have found out why so many grieving parents disappeared before me. But before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. Have you ever lost someone you loved so deeply that you would give anything for one more conversation, one more hug, one more chance to hear their voice? Because if you have, then you'll understand exactly why I didn't run when I heard my son calling from inside the wall. Before we continue, kindly like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and which part of the story hit you the hardest. I believe this story found you today for a reason. Now let's get back to the story. My name is Mara Bell. Until a year ago, my life was painfully ordinary. I lived in a small apartment outside Indianapolis. I worked remotely as an administrative coordinator for a medical billing company. Most days revolved around deadlines, grocery lists, and making sure my 6-year-old son Oliver got to school on time. He was the kind of kid who made friends everywhere. The kind who asked 100 questions before breakfast. The kind who believed the tooth fairy was part magician and part secret agent. Then he got sick. The doctors said it was an aggressive viral infection. One week he was running through the apartment pretending to be a firefighter. The next week I was standing beside a hospital bed listening to machines go quiet. After the funeral, everyone told me the same thing. Take it one day at a time. Stay busy. Lean on, family. But grief doesn't listen to advice. So I kept his room exactly the way he left it. His toy fire truck stayed beside the bed. His favorite blue blanket remained folded at the foot of the mattress. Even the tiny fingerprints on the hallway mirror stayed untouched. I couldn't bring myself to erase them. Then, 3 weeks after we buried him, I woke up and found a baby tooth beneath my pillow. And that night, something inside the wall called me Mummy. At the time, I thought those two events were unrelated. I was wrong. The next evening, I heard the knocking again, and this time, it was closer. Not from Oliver's bedroom, from the hallway wall directly outside my own room. 3 slow taps. Tap, tap, tap. I opened the door so fast I nearly pulled it off its hinges. Nothing. No children, no neighbors, no explanation, only silence. The next morning, I found 3 more baby teeth. 1 beneath my pillow, 1 inside a folded towel in the laundry basket, 1 sitting in a kitchen drawer beside the silverware. Each was wet. Each had blood clinging to the root. I started keeping them in a glass jar. At first, it was just to prove to myself I wasn't imagining things. Then, the jar began filling faster than I could explain. Teeth appeared beneath couch cushions, inside pillowcases, under folded blankets, always near places where people slept. And the more teeth I found, the closer the knocking seemed to move. I started documenting everything in a notebook. Dates, times, locations, patterns. Within a week, I had pages of notes and no answers. So, I started asking questions. The apartment manager looked uncomfortable the moment I mentioned voices inside the walls. He claimed nobody had ever reported anything unusual. But 2 elderly residents told a different story. One woman swore previous tenants had complained about children crying behind the plaster. Another claimed parents had reported missing baby teeth decades ago. A 3rd resident insisted none of it had ever happened. The stories contradicted each other so completely that I couldn't tell who was lying or who was scared. Desperate for proof, I requested hallway security footage. What I saw still turns my stomach. The camera showed an empty hallway outside my apartment. No visitors, no children, no movement. Then, one by one, baby teeth began appearing on the floor, materializing from thin air. 12, then 20, then more. I watched them accumulate for nearly 6 minutes. Nobody placed them there. They simply appeared. And if you've ever lost someone you loved, you understand how easy it is to chase even the smallest sign that they might still be with you. Kindly like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. That night, the singing started, not from one room, from every wall. Hush, little baby. The voice stopped. Then silence swallowed the apartment. When I finally gathered enough courage to check Oliver's room, something waited for me on the floor. A crayon drawing. Me, Oliver, holding hands beside a freshly dug grave. And beneath us, written in crooked brown letters, "Home soon." I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The drawing sat on my kitchen table while I stared at it until sunrise. Home soon. The words felt less like a promise and more like a threat. The next morning, I took the drawing to the city archives. At first, I wasn't looking for monsters. I was looking for a rational explanation. Instead, I found something much worse. Buried inside decades-old newspaper records were reports stretching back nearly 70 years. Different neighborhoods, different families, the same pattern. Children died, parents grieved. Then strange things began happening. Baby teeth appeared beneath pillows. Children spoke to invisible friends. Knocking came from inside walls. Several reports ended with disappearances. Most were dismissed as mental breakdowns brought on by loss. But there were too many similarities, too many details repeating across generations. One article mentioned local folklore. A name appeared again and again, the Tooth Child. According to the legend, It wasn't a ghost, and it wasn't a demon. It was something older, something that fed on grief itself. It learned everything about a dead child, their voice, their habits, their memories. Then it used those memories to convince a parent that their child had returned. The more desperately the parent wanted to believe, the stronger the creature became. That was when I realized the horrifying truth. It wasn't stealing children, it was stealing grief. And I had been feeding it for weeks. Later that afternoon, I tracked down an elderly former tenant who had lived in my building decades earlier. The moment he saw the drawing, his face turned white. "My wife saw those," he whispered, "before she disappeared. He told me she had heard knocking inside the walls for months. Then one night, she followed a child's voice into an empty room. She never came back. No body was ever found. That night, the thing stopped hiding. It laughed exactly like Oliver. It remembered things only Oliver should have known. His favorite cartoons, his bedtime jokes, the way he used to ask for pancakes on Saturdays. But its smile was wrong. Too many teeth. Rows upon rows shifting behind its lips. Then the apartment began changing. Teeth rained from the ceiling. Family photographs leaked dark red stains. The walls pulsed like living flesh. And Oliver's bedroom stretched impossibly deep into darkness. That was when I finally understood the rule. Every tooth placed beneath a pillow delayed its arrival by one night, and I was almost out. As I stood frozen in the hallway, Oliver's bedroom door slowly opened. A small figure stepped into view. Almost my son. Almost. It smiled. Its mouth opened impossibly wide, and it whispered, "You invited me in." The final night arrived with a silence so complete it felt unnatural. There were no teeth left. Not in the jar.
Not beneath the pillows. Not hidden in drawers. Nothing. For the first time since Oliver's funeral, I had nothing left to offer. The apartment reacted immediately. Wallpaper split open with wet, tearing sounds. Dark blood seeped from the cracks. Thousands of baby teeth spilled across the floor, covering the hardwood like a white, chattering tide. Then the knocking began. Not from one wall, from all of them. Tap, tap, tap. The entire apartment seemed to breathe. And then he stepped out of Oliver's bedroom, almost perfect. Almost. His curls were right. His eyes were right. Even the tiny scar on his chin was exactly where I remembered it. My heart broke all over again. "Mommy," he whispered. The voice was Oliver's. So was the smile. So was the way he held his arms out toward me. Pick me up. For one horrible moment, I almost did. Then he started humming Oliver's favorite bedtime song. And I noticed the clicking. The teeth, hundreds of them, shifting behind his lips. "You miss him so much," it said softly. The smile widened. We all did. Suddenly, thousands of whispers poured from its mouth. Children's voices. Parents crying. Families begging. Every tooth inside its body belonged to another child it had once pretended to be. It had been doing this for centuries. Feeding on grief, wearing love like a disguise. That's when I understood. The teeth were the anchor. I gathered every pillow, every blanket, every tooth scattered across the floor. I dumped them into the bathtub and drenched them with lighter fluid. The creature screamed. Not with Oliver's voice, with thousands. I struck a match. The fire exploded upward. Every tooth shrieked. The thing lunged toward me. Its skin split apart, peeling away in gray sheets. Beneath it was a writhing mass of human teeth grinding against one another endlessly. Then, everything collapsed. The knocking stopped. The walls fell silent. Morning finally arrived. For the first time since Oliver died, the